Hello, this is George Dixon Academy. The date is December 18th, 2018, and we'll be interviewing Hart about Balsall Heath.
What is your full name?
My name is Valerie Margaret Hart. Yes, that's my married name. I was born Valerie Margaret Cooper, but I'm Valerie Margaret Hart.
Why is Balsall Heath so important to you?
Well, I think it's an extraordinary and unique place. I came there in 1975. I lived sort of on the edge of Balsall Heath, well, in Church Road.
Yeah.
And I was amazed by how dreadful the area was in its physical state, actually. Because after the Second World War, when it had huge bombing, all the priority went to the city centre, and a lot of the bomb sites in Balsall Heath were just left. And there were kids playing all over the bomb sites, and it was absolutely wrecked. The houses were wrecked. There were sort of houses half standing, and other houses, people living in them next door, and it was really a terrible physical landscape. But the people there were really great. There were a very interesting mix of people who had come from all over the world, and it was really vibrant and interesting and exciting. And the people were determined to make more of Balsall Heath and to rebuild the neighbourhood and make it into something wonderful. Do you want to add to that, Carl?
Yeah, if I may. Balsall Heath splits into two kind of areas, doesn't it, Val? There's the Mosey Road side of Balsall Heath going down towards the Central Mosque. We all know the Central Mosque, yeah? And then across the road there's a place people think in Balsall Heath, it's actually called Highgate. But then the other side of the Mosey Road, particularly where the school was, where Val was, is really the Ladypool Road area. And my family came from that part of Balsall Heath, but it was always known as the Sparkbrook part of Balsall Heath. So there were quite two, not separate, they overlapped and they interlinked, but the Ladypool Road was a very, very good shopping centre.
Marvellous.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, really exciting.
Very exciting. And I was, when Val came to Birmingham, to Balsall Heath in 75, was it?
Yeah.
75. I was, let me think now, I was born in 56, so I was 19. And although I didn't live in Sparkbrook or Balsall Heath, my dad came from Sparkbrook, from a little street called Studley Street. My granddad came from Studley Street, my great-grandmother came from Queen Street, and my great-grandfather came from White Street, all very close to each other. So although I lived like Valley Moseley, nearby, Sparkbrook and Balsall Heath were essentially my upbringing, because our family had a little business down there. And Val will tell you that the 70s were quite intriguing in many ways, because it was a changeover in the... Do you know, if I said to you youngsters the demographics, who could tell me what demographics mean? Any ideas? Demographics? Any ideas? Can somebody tell me, yeah?
I like politics.
A very good idea. It's not, I like the idea.
Different types of people.
Different types of people. It's from a Greek word, demos, meaning people. And you know graphs, you make up a graph. So the demographics were changing, weren't they?
They were indeed, yes. Yeah.
What struck you about the demographics at that time?
Well, it was an interesting mix. There were a lot of older white inhabitants who'd lived there for years and years and years.
Very much so.
Getting older and living in the houses they'd lived in. Although quite a lot of people had been rehoused when the houses were bombed. But also there were newer people coming. Well, there were a lot of Irish people.
A lot of Irish, yeah.
And a lot of people arriving from the Caribbean in particular, and from Pakistan and Bangladesh.
The 70s was very much, as Val said, there was lots of older white English families who'd lived there all their lives. Many of their sons and daughters had moved out to the area, most of them had moved out to the area. There were lots of Irish. There was also a Yemeni community.
Yes, they were quite early.
Very early, the late 30s. And they were a little bit hidden from view, weren't they, the Yemeni community? They kept themselves to themselves, very hard working. There were lots of people from the Caribbean, particularly the smaller islands like Barbados, St Kitts and Nevis. There were Jamaicans. The first East African Asians came over following Idi Amin.
Yes.
In, so that'd be the mid-70s.
Yes, now that was an important thing as well.
Very good.
Yes, because They were forcibly ejected really from their country,
Yeah.
in Uganda. But lots of them formed the Clifton Road Mosque, which is just off the Moseley Road, which is particular to those particular group of people.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a huge, huge mosque, which now is currently in the process of having a rebuilding program.
Yeah.
To run out of space.
And it was interesting because the East African Asians were a mixture of Sikhs, Hindus and Muslims.
Yes, that's right.
And then there was a few Kashmiri men, and not many Bengalis were there though.
No.
No, there was a few Kashmiri men, a few Pakistani men. That started to change in the late 80s. Again, the Irish were moving out,
Yeah.
the Caribbean people were moving out, the last of the white English were dying or moving out, and it's, since then it's become much more a South Asian neighbourhood,
It
hasn't it?
has, yeah. One of the things that I did when I was doing the first book on Balsall Heath was that we did a lot of going around and talking to people in their homes to collect up their own stories and photos. And that was really fascinating because we collected a lot of oral history at that point of people who remembered things from the past, but also more recent people of what things felt like when they first arrived in Balsall Heath. But also we went around and we went and talked to a lot of the people who were still running little businesses in Balsall Heath. And that was fascinating because there were all these people who, let me think of one. There was a place in Woodfield Road.
Yeah.
And we went and saw this chap, and he was elderly, you know, and he'd got his wife sitting beside him, who was obviously doing the secretarial work. And on the wall behind him was a picture of his grandfather. And his grandfather had started the firm, and then, you know, it had gone on through the family, and there they still were in Woodfield Road. So it was sort of like a family business had grown up. And a lot of the businesses started up in people's back gardens. So another one was Bradbury's down in
Yes.
Highgate.
Yeah.
Now the story that the Bradburys told was, because we went and saw it, it was a biggish factory in Highgate Square actually. But what he said was his grandfather had started it with his wife's copper boiler, a sort of big boiler thing that she used to do the washing in, and down the bottom of the garden. And actually then he was making metal stuff into his boiler and everything. And then eventually the works took over the whole of the back garden, and then he built the sort of factory place, and then the family moved out and the factory stayed there.
Okay.
But they were the people who there was a big pageant of Birmingham in 1939, which featured all sorts of different people, including loads of Civil War episodes with all these people dressed in armour, and all the armour was made at Bradbury's, which is quite lovely.
You told me
isn't it?
something there, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but yes. And then years and years later, we did a little exhibition in Balsall Heath Library called Balsall Heath at Work. And the Bradburys lent us this little model child suit of armour as a sort of sample of what they made for the pageant. And all lots of kids came around the exhibition, the schools came round. And one of these junior schools that came round, this little boy who kept interrupting all the time, saying, I know something about that. And the lady, who was quite elderly, who was talking to them about it, kept shutting him up. And eventually, on his way out the door, he was still trying to interrupt, and he said to me, I've worn that armour. You know, and he said, oh yeah, you know. So he went out the door, and just as he was going out, I said, what's your name? And his name was Jamie Bradbury. And his dad had the armour at home and had let him try it on.
Straight on.
We didn't pick it up at the time, but there you are, that was him.
And that's been a big change in the area over the last 40 years. Most of the factories have closed down
Yeah.
and moved out.
Lots of little small workshops and businesses have mostly gone. Yeah,
Most of them have gone.
What was your favourite shop?
Trippers Bakers, because their stuff was always made that day and
Yeah.
fresh and lovely. And not only that, it was a beautiful shop when you went in.
Yeah.
It's now called Lahore, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Lahore now.
But it had lovely round windows on the
Yeah.
outside. And when you went inside, behind all the shelves at the back, there were mirrors. So everything was sort
Yes.
of reflected in the mirrors. It was such a beautiful shop to go in. And the food was brilliant.
And it was very plain.
Yes.
It just had a counter as you went in the shop. It was quite a big shop, wasn't it, Val? And there's a counter on your left, and then a counter on the far side,
Yeah.
and then there were just shelves.
Of all these lovely cakes with the mirrors at the back.
Oh, beautiful. And then as you stood on the corner, just to the left, was the bakehouse, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's it.
Where
Yeah,
they bake
just like
everything.
that.
And they did, oh, that's something else I forgot. Their sausage rolls.
Yes, they were good.
Oh, they were fantastic sausage rolls.
Yeah.
And it was that I suppose, that and Burden's was my favourite shop. When I was little, Burden's ice cream. But that closed down probably in the early 70s to mid 70s, that closed down.
Did you know who Ernie Guest was?
No, I don't know.
You've done some research on that, haven't you? I'm very impressed. I've got a
I
photo.
don't know any guest.
I've got a photograph of Ernie Guest. Remind me about that one as well. I forgot that. The Guests lived in my dad's street, Studley Street, and they were barra boys. Do you know where a barra boy is? Right. You know the bull ring. Yeah, you know where the markets are, all the traders. In the old days, they didn't have proper stalls. Some of them did, but a lot of them would have a cart, a hand cart. Have you seen a hand cart? You know, you push it. It's got two handles coming out and just a flat cart there. And they would have two wheels on, and they would put their produce, what they were selling there. And there used to be a few barra boys in older districts. So there used to be one in King's Heath, on the corner of Silver Street and by the Hare and Hounds, and Ernie Guest had his little barra at the top of Studley Street on the Ladypool Road, and he used to sell mostly vegetables but things like that on his barra. And there was a song about barra boys as well. There was an old song about all my life I wanted to be a barra boy. So yeah, Ernie Guest was a well-known character down the Ladypool Road, probably just before Val's time. Because the families from my dad's street were all being moved out in the late 60s.
Yeah. Bernard used to tell me about this lady who went up and down the road singing Glory.
Glory's Bay. She used to go along the street. Now tell them about Bernard. He's a very interesting man, wasn't he?
Well, yes. He was a member of the local history society, but his chap was born down in Sherborne Road, the other side of
Yes.
Balsall Heath. But he lived at number 137.5 Sherborne Road. That was his official address where he lived, because it was a back-to-back house. So his was just a half house that went onto a courtyard. But he went on living in Balsall Heath for years and years, but he had very strong memories of everything.
He was a brilliant man.
He was very, very good.
Yeah.
But he used to talk about this lady going up and down the road, and she walked along, and she'd got a terrific limp like this, and it's saying, "Glory for me, glory for you, glory to me, glory to you." And she went up and down one side of the road with a terrible sort of limp like this, and then, you know, looking absolutely dreadful. When she got to the end of the road, she came down the other side with a changed leg.
And there used to be another old lady who used to sing "Count Your Blessings."
Oh, yes.
The other ones used to sing "Count Your Blessings." There were a lot of characters, weren't
Yes,
there, Val?
well, yeah.
Lots of characters. It was changing when we were, you know, when I was, we knew it.
Yes.
The characters were dying out and moving away.
Who inspired you to become a local historian?
I think probably the teachers at my junior school, because I had a lot of teachers who were very good, but the one in particular was very, very interested in history. And I suppose it started then, really. Yes, I'm sorry, I can't remember really, apart from that.
With me, it was my family that inspired me to be a local historian, to be a historian full stop. Because my dad's family were all Sparkbrook, and I worked in Sparkbrook from Balsall Heath from a very young age. So although I grew up, luckily, we grew up better off. My mum and dad were very proud of where they came from. My dad was very proud to be a Sparkbrook bloke. My mum was very proud of coming from Aston. And both families used to meet a lot and talk about their childhoods.
Yes, and it's interesting you say that, Cole, because Balsall Heath over the years has had a very bad reputation.
Yeah.
Lots of people used to regard it as the worst part of Birmingham, and there was a prostitution problem for a long while, but people always used to say, they didn't want to say they lived in Balsall Heath.
No.
But actually, I mean, it's terrible, because people who came from Balsall Heath always felt very proud
Yes.
of their area.
Yeah, very much so.
And there was a lot to be proud of, so it's quite sad that.
And I think that the point that Val made right at the start, that the housing was bad. There was bomb sites. We used to call them bomb pecks, bomb sites everywhere, and there was a lot of problems in Balsall Heath. But there was a very strong feeling of people working together and helping each other.
Yes.
And then there came along a very important group of people. Val was part of them, the Balsall Heath Forum.
That's right.
Tell them about the Balsall Heath Forum, Val.
Well, actually, it started surprisingly late.
Did it?
Yes, it did. St Paul's project, as it became, was always a very important part of the area, and sort of trying to encourage people to do things and help themselves, really. And out of that, in the 1990s, there came the Balsall Heath Forum, which was local residents getting together, which is what we'd been working on for years, but they got together to form the forum. And we had so many residents groups, still are really, all over the area, working to improve things.
And it's made a big impact, hasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Changed the area.
And I think one of the interesting things is today, in the late 70s and 80s, the Ladypool Road really declined as a shopping centre and was getting a bit tatty. But if you go down the Ladypool Road now, it's really exciting because the Asian shopkeepers have spent money on the shops.
Well, in so many restaurants.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's the what Ladypool Road is known for years after, in its later years, was the home of the Balti houses in Balsall Heath, and they reckon that that's where the Balti started. Yeah. And actually, there's various places in Balsall Heath that claim they were the place that first had the Balti.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we think it originated from the local newspaper that we did, which was called the Balsall Heathen, because we had the first ever advert for a Balti house in this little newspaper that we did.
Yeah.
And we think that actually the chap who was laying it out misspelt it, which was how we got the name Balti.
Really? I'll have to have a look at that one.
Did you see that programme about Balderdash and thingies, which had the origin of the Balti?
Yes.
Yes, that's had that in there.
That added in there.
Yeah, so the Balti houses were really big. They were the big Asian food, Balti. But if you go down now, there's every different nationality you could possibly think of. So there's Lebanese and Turkish.
There's Moroccan. There's lots of Chinese type style restaurants, steakhouses, dessert shops. There's loads of dessert shops. So and there's lots of sari shops as well, aren't there?
Yes, a huge wedding business. Yes. But actually, some years ago, a primary school in Balsall Heath did some sort of advertising thing about Balsall Heath, and they sort of talked about all the lovely things happening in Balsall Heath. And what they called it was all the world in one place, which is lovely.
It is. It's a really
that's really like Balsall Heath.
It is.
And in fact, other parts of the city have had a lot of tensions between people from different ethnic backgrounds, and Balsall Heath hasn't.
No.
It's been remarkably harmonious, and at the point when there were riots in Handsworth, that same weekend we had Balsall Heath Carnival, and we went ahead with it. Everybody was saying we shouldn't go ahead with it. We did. It was lovely. There was actually no problem whatsoever.
There were rumours all day long, weren't there?
Yeah.
That gangs were coming up and it was going to be attacked, but it never happened, and the police were supportive, although the police had to send all their men and women elsewhere, didn't they?
Other parts of the city,
I remember standing outside our shops all the shops were boarded up on the Spark Hill.
That's right,
And we stood outside our shops, me and my dad and my brother, to protect them. And nothing happened in Spark Hill and Broad Street and Sparkbrook, thankfully. And I think Val makes a very important point there about the way people work really hard to get together. And Val's made a big impact there.
My grandma went on holiday to Yemen, and then she went to the Maasai people, and then they made this for me.
That's beautiful. Can I have a look? Oh, isn't that beautiful? Look at that.
Beautiful.
It's got your name on.
And which people did she go and see, Terry?
The Maasai.
The Maasai in Kenya. Yeah. They're a very powerful ancient tribe, the Maasai are. And they made that specially for you. Have you ever been to Yemen?
No.
No? So who is it from the Yemen in your family?
My grandma.
Your grandma.
When did she come here? When she was small or when she was grown up?
When she was grown up.
And does she speak Arabic and English, or just Arabic?
Speaks a bit of Arabic. and she knows a lot of English.
Yeah. Thank you, Terry. Do you know where she's from in Yemen?
No.
No.